Everyone, greetings everyone. My name is Linsa. I'm the product manager at Nimblework. A very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar on the topic, delivering minimum viable value from your Kanban system. I think people are still joining in. So let me start with the agenda and set the stage for an insightful discussion. I'll start quickly with the introductions. Following that, we'll have a quick background on Nimblework. Then we will hand over the session to our main speaker, Sudhi. Also, we'll have a Q&A by the end of the session. So first and foremost, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude to all of you for joining this webinar brought to you by Nimblework. Nimblework is a leading B2B SaaS provider of collaborative AI-powered adaptive work and project management. So just a quick bit of housekeeping. As is customary, we are recording today's webinar, and we will ensure that you receive the recording and the entire session via follow-up email. Please feel free to ask questions, share your insights, and engage with us using the Q&A feature on the Zoom panel. All right, so I'll start with the brief introductions on our speaker. To start with, Sudhi Talheri, Sudhi as we call him, he is the head of engineering and products at Nimblework. His career spans over 3 decades in various IT services and product companies. He has worked extensively across project, program delivery, product development, and sales. He leads the development of Nimble and Swift Kanban products. And he's a distinguished fellow at Kanban University. Also, I would like to introduce Mahesh, our co-founder and CMO at Nimblework. He's an esteemed career professional with an extensive experience in project management, product management, marketing, and consulting. Also, he's also a recognized Kanban fellow and a coach and a trainer. Over to you, Mahesh, and looking forward for an enriching discussion, Sudhi.
All right. Thanks, Linza. And good morning, good evening to all of you who have joined so far. Let me share my screen. Let's get the technology out of the way. All right. Just tell me that you're able to see this.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. So again, a warm welcome to everybody.
We are seeing it in your present. We are seeing the presenters mode, not the slideshow mode.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me fix that. Is that better now?
No, it's the same.
Same. Okay, let me stop sharing for a second. Clearly, I'm sharing the wrong window. Okay, is that better now?
That's right.
All right. Okay, as I said, let's get the technology out of the way. Good. So again, a warm welcome to everybody. And I know that I've been repeating myself. A quick introduction to Nimblework and a quick overview for those of you who may not know too much about us. So Nimblework used to be Digite earlier, and we've been around as a company for more than 20 years. We are a pioneer in web-based project and work management collaborative solutions, and have more than 2 decades of experience helping teams deliver projects and services successfully to their customers. We are headquartered here in Cupertino, California, which is where I'm based. And for those of you who have any Apple product, you might see the name Cupertino on the product packaging. So you have an idea where that is. We have over 1 million users of our products across the overall spectrum around the world. So a lot of different types of companies, different sizes of teams who are our customers. And I'd encourage you to learn more about us at nimblework.com. Just a quick look at some of our products. So the main umbrella product platform that we have is Nimble, which is adaptive project and work management system that allows the entire company or individual teams to work on a variety of different types of workflows, projects, what have you, depending on the kind of work that your teams are doing. You can use any of the capabilities that are listed here, from Nimble Agile, work management, OKRs, etc., to using the entire system, Nimble Enterprise, for running all of your different projects in a single platform. Swift Kanban is our standalone system that helps you adopt and implement the Kanban method. And we have extensive capability in Swift Kanban. For those of you who are used to Kanban and are part of the Kanban community, you might be quite familiar with Swift Kanban. But nevertheless, a lot of capability that Swift Kanban provides in terms of helping you implement Agile at scale using portfolio Kanban, upstream Kanban, and a variety of different Kanban analytics that really help you implement the Kanban method effectively. So just the quick introduction there. Again, if you have questions about any of the products, we would be happy to answer those for you. And a final slide here, just to give you a quick sense of who are some of our customers are. And you might recognize some well-known brands here and some not so well-known. Just wanted to let you know that we have customers where tens of thousands of users are using our product to deliver all of their business to their customers. And we have some very small customers. So our products are really scalable for the kind of organization that you are and the kind of requirements that you have for your project and work management needs. So with that, I'm going to welcome Suri to the stage here and stop sharing. And Suri, welcome. And it's your floor.
Thanks, Mahesh. Let me share my screen here. Can you, do I need to do something to, it says one participant can share at a time. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, I think I got it now. Can you all see my screen now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so thanks, Linsa. Thanks, Mahesh. What we're going to talk about today is how to get a minimum value from your Kanban system. And I'll give a little bit of the background as to what was the genesis of what was the reason why we thought about this topic, and then get into exactly how you can go ahead doing that. So Mahesh just covered this, but so let me just go ahead and do the talk itself. So over the years, we have been actively in the Kanban community for almost 13 years now. And we have seen multiple implementations, different customers do it in different ways, different models. But somehow the implementations that we see on the ground are very different from what we actually highlight and bring out as things that teams could do in their evolutionary adoption path. And in most cases, what we see is just a Kanban board that is implemented. The Kanban board, often, if you really do a little bit of deep dive, you will see it is kind of something being put together, but some of the fundamentals behind what should go behind a Kanban system are either not implemented right, or they are not there at all. And we'll talk about some of those things today. The important thing to recognize is that the Kanban method, though it has very few simple principles and practices, but if you really want to adopt them at one shot, it is just a fairly overwhelming change process. The method itself is supposed to be very evolutionary, starting with what you have. But most people, what they'll end up doing is they would attend a class, they would attend a session, they will, and then they try and pick up most of what they've learned and try to implement it. The Kanban University created the KMM model, which was designed to actually solve that problem, which was designed to be able to take you step by step. But once again, very few teams and very few people that I've seen have the patience to kind of go it in that incremental evolutionary pattern. And so what they'll end up doing is they'll end up doing a lot of things. But these lot of things obviously become too overwhelming for the team to jump to. And as a result, very soon they reach a state of saturation where they don't know what more to do or how to take it from there, but they're not seeing any benefit or any significant benefit from what they are already doing. And most coaches think that all the things that we teach in the Kanban curriculum are very exciting to learn, right? It is always intellectually stimulating because there's a lot of mathematical and scientific basis behind what we teach and what we talk about. But the people who are on the project or working on the team could care less about what's the mathematics behind, right? What they want to do is to get their job done, and their job is to deliver. Let's say in my example, in our software team, their job is to build software, not to follow the Kanban method. They would not mind if it doesn't obstruct in their way of doing things, but if it starts impeding, then they would push back and resort to the lowest common denominator that they can live with so that they can keep everybody happy. So most people just want to get their job done, and often as coaches, we kind of fail to recognize that this basic principle, that what's the exciting determinant factor for me as a coach or me as a Kanban practitioner is not necessarily the same thing for the team as well. For them, it is something else. And it becomes very important to be able to appreciate where they are coming from and how one could adopt the Kanban method without making them feel that what they are doing has become secondary objective now. During this talk, we'll cover some of the low-hanging fruits, some things which if one follows, will significantly benefit most teams. Of course, the extent of benefit would differ from team to team, but you will still benefit significantly, and you'll definitely be at a much more higher level of maturity than what you would be otherwise. The talk does assume that you have some understanding about some of the language that we use in the Kanban method. I will try to kind of explain some of these through, but if it's not clear, please do put in the Q&A panel, and we'll try and expand over that. So let's begin with the actual process part itself. So the first thing that I would like to say is that many organizations, I'm very tempted to say most organizations do not use the static method. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the static method, but static is a very fairly simple approach which can become a basis of you discussing with your team and then coming to a common consensus of how your Kanban system could look like. So it's not, if you do it without the team, if it is just a project manager or a process guy doing it and saying, okay, guys, this is our Kanban system, you will have very little buy-in. So it's very important to do it with the team during that process. The process is extremely simple. You understand first where your sources of dissatisfaction are between all your stakeholders. It could be your team members, it could be your customer, it could be your leadership and management team. Identify all the sources of dissatisfaction. Understand what are all the different kinds of work that comes to you, the sources of demand that are all the different work item types. And often a lot of dissatisfaction is because of a mismatch between the rate at which work is coming in, demand is coming in, and the rate at which the capability the team is able to deliver. And it's just the simple cadence mismatch between the two that creates a dissatisfaction. How to solve it? We can talk over that during throughout the session. But the point is that it's extremely important to understand where your mismatch is in your current team between the rate at which work is coming in, the demand, and the rate at which work is getting delivered, which is your capability. Once you have done this much, then what you can do is you can identify for each of the different types of work that comes to you, what are the value stream stages? What is the workflow that they go through? Again, sometimes they're common for different work item types, but more often than not, there are individual variations. There are small nuances between one work item type to another. So it's important to be able to get that sense and to say, okay, if I have tickets, this will follow this kind of a workflow. If I have my stories, this would follow this kind of a workflow. And it's important to kind of be able to differentiate into multiple swim lanes so that it's very clearly articulated each of these value streams for the different work item types. Many teams they think they use Kanban, and they use very lightweight Kanban tools which can't even distinguish between swim lanes. And that's a precursor to immediately concluding that such a team has not gone through the static process, because the static process would have led them to identify the different types of work and understand the differences in the value stream for each of those work item types. Kanban has something called as class of service. I'm not getting into what a class of service is, but it's important to at least identify which of the classes of service are applicable to the work item types that you are going for. And with all these inputs, you're in a pretty good shape to be able to identify and define your Kanban system. So the most important thing is to be able to define the system in a little more structured, scientific manner, taking the team into with you, making them part of the discussion process, and not doing it unilaterally and then dumping it on them. The second important thinking is to understand what is an upstream and a downstream. And I've seen all kinds of definition, or all kinds of, again, confusion as to what is an upstream and a downstream, and how are people defining an upstream and a downstream. One of the easiest definitions that I have used and have concluded in my own mind over the last decade that I've been in the Kanban community is upstream is the process that till when you're continuously prioritizing and deciding what to do. So anything which is an option that you are going to do, so if you're getting, 10 stories or 10 epics, and you know that I have to prioritize with my customer, with my stakeholders, and come to a decision of whether this one has to be done or not, any value stream stage, that is from that work that comes in to that stage where it becomes a commitment, is your upstream process. Any process from this point that it is one now committed and you are going to deliver it, that's your downstream. Now, in reality, what it typically happens, if it's a company like Nimble Work, where you're doing software development, therefore, whatever we do in the roadmap planning, in the product management, when we're discussing different options, what would work, what would not work, discussing with different stakeholders, prioritization, all these stages of the life cycle are all upstream. And once it's committed, once everybody has signed off that yes, this is what we will absolutely do, then at that point of time, that becomes your downstream value stream. One of the objectives of upstream also should be to remove the impediments for your downstream team. What you want is to make sure that for every work item or card that you're going to give the downstream team, are there any dependencies? Are there any blockers? Do you need a critical resource, a critical person who might be going on leave during that time? Do you need a critical piece of infrastructure that you do not have, and therefore you will get stuck? So if there is any impediment, you must look at the upstream, during the upstream process, to understand what are the critical dependencies, and if there's any dependency that could become a blocker for the team once they pull it for execution. If it does, then you should block it upstream until that impediment is resolved. So what you want to make sure is that if 70-80% of your team is working in the downstream side, they are able to make their work most productive, most efficient, without any loss of time. And therefore make all the volatility in your options and the risks of work happening, take it upstream, so that risk of your downstream losing time is completely eliminated. classic thing for Scrum teams, and this is obviously one of the things that that the Kanban University talks about in its curriculum of doing Scrum better with Kanban, is to move from task board to a value stream. Because when you're doing a task board, a simple to do, in progress, done, you absolutely understand, no, you are not able to do any analysis of your inefficiencies between what is happening during that in progress cycle itself. Further, of course, there is all the all the issues of time box cadence and what is the impact of time box cadence, and I'm not keeping that as a separate discussion. Another problem that I've seen is many teams create a very long value stream stage. In fact, often teams struggle to create a value stream stage because they get confused between a value stream stage and a workflow stage. If you were to think about a workflow stage that one would do in a diagram like Visio or something like that, it will have a lot of conditional branching. If in this scenario go here, in this scenario you go here, that's how a workflow would look. A value stream is a much higher level abstraction of your workflow. And therefore, it's extremely important to keep the value stream at a high level. If you do find that a particular stage is taking a lot more cycle time, or there are more issues than what you expect, then you can definitely break that down for a period of time till you get clarity as to what is happening in that box. But it's important to understand that a value stream stage is a much higher level of abstraction than a typical workflow stage or a workflow that a ticket might have otherwise gone through. As I said, static will often suggest different value stream for different work types. Again, a big point source of confusion in most board designs is to understand where you put your buffer lanes. I've seen teams that absolutely indiscriminately divide every column into an in progress and done. They would there is very little understanding as to where you should put your buffer lane. A buffer lane is a classic example where you introduce when work is going to be handed off from one person to another. So if one person is doing development and one person is doing testing, you want a buffer lane in middle. But if the same person is doing the development and the same person is doing the testing, then you don't need a buffer lane. That person will take the card, take it to development. Once his development is done, he will take it to testing because he's ready to take it. That's his next activity for that card. So you don't need to break a buffer. You don't need to put a buffer lane in between. So buffer lanes are designed to be able to put a handoff between two people, because that's where the whole concept of pull-based execution comes. You are done, the next person pulls it when they are ready. Understand where your WIP limits have to be put. And again, this is something that we teach in the Kanban community. And so we are all very tempted to put this, on top of every column, very mechanically. Serves very little purpose, because I am still in search of a team that is really able to enforce the WIP limits, where work actually gets getting pulled in when WIP limits are reached. If you're able to do that, kudos to you, but that's not been my experience. So what I suggest is something else, but nevertheless, it's important to understand, even if you were to put WIP limits at the process level, where to put that. There's no point in putting it in the in progress stage and in the done stage, because in progress and done are only states of that work, of that value stream stage. So if my coding has an in progress and done, whether it is in progress or done, that card is still in coding. It has still not gone into testing. So therefore, it's extremely important to understand that the WIP limit needs to be at the coding stage, not at the in progress column or in the done column, or in the buffer lane. So it's important to understand that. Otherwise, again, you're not getting the benefit of putting a WIP limit. The WIP limit forces you to create a collaboration between the team that's working on it and the individual that's working on it and the individual who's supposed to take it downstream. Because if the downstream is getting bottlenecked and the WIP limit of the previous column is reached, then it will force the person to go and collaborate with the downstream person to say, how can I help you? How can I resolve this bottleneck? But if you don't put that WIP at the right limit, it will not work. It is just a theoretical limit that you've just put. Nobody is enforcing it or nobody is working as per its intent. In order to make upstream successful, it's important to make sure that you take some of your senior capacity from the downstream team and commit them to the upstream function. They should work with the product team to make sure that what is being planned for is feasible, there is full clarity, they have full definition of what needs to be done, the NFR requirements are all absolutely clear. It's important for some of the senior people in your downstream team to collaborate with the upstream team and make sure that the pipeline is in the upstream team is fully resolved, so that, like I said before, once the team picks it up, you can really execute it fast. So this is a sample example of an upstream that we do at Nimblework, where in the left half of the value stream is essentially used for getting complete visibility and clarity of what needs to be done. If there's any functional ambiguity, or if there is some technical limitation, which means that the architecture cannot handle what you want to be done, then all those issues will be brought up at this stage and will be resolved. By the time the card comes to a groomed backlog, which is actually taking what has been decided to be done and cleared, and it's now going to be broken up into the right size so that it can be done by the team. By the time it comes to that stage, to the right side, it has got full clarity. There is no more ambiguity. So all blockers have to be in the left side of this value stream. Avoid blockers in the right side of this value stream. And here's how a downstream would typically look like. Again, this is a little more, all the things that I sometimes teach do not always get practiced in my own team. So here you do see more than 10 value stream stages, but the intent is to still be able to keep it at a level where you are able to see the full value stream and you don't have to scroll left and right to go from one stage to the next. There are processes where you will not be able to distinguish between an upstream and a downstream, because consider a pre-sale cycle process. Every stage of the process, or a simple recruitment process, every stage of the process is dropping off some candidates, right up to the final selection, right up to their final date of joining. There are situations when we make an offer and people don't join. So every stage of the process is dropping off some percentage of the cards that are coming in. So it's not necessary that every process will have an upstream and a downstream, but most cases that is the case. For sure, software development, that is absolutely the case. So coming back to work in progress limits, I would highly recommend that teams start with plain and simple user WIP limit and completely abandon process WIP limits. Process WIP limits need a much more higher sense of maturity. It needs a sense of commitment that, yes, we will not pull in cards if we cross the WIP limits. It's much more practical and much more explainable to your team and to your leadership team as well, that why do you want anybody to have more than 3 cards in their name? What good is it going to cause if you have more than 3 cards in an individual's name? So, but of course, you need to calibrate that based on your own environment and your own situation. It's just a recommendation, but it's much more easier and practical to sell the concept of user WIP. And if you implement user WIP, you will get tremendous improvement in flow efficiency, because cards are not just waiting for each other to get done. You'll almost be able to move from a single digit flow efficiency to almost like 35-40% flow efficiency just by implementing user WIP limit, which I think is a remarkable improvement over where most teams in real life are.
Just to clarify, Sudhi, when you say user WIP, you mean the number of cards that a user can have at a time
on their own name. That's correct.
Right.
Okay. Nimble, right from its early days in the Swift Kanban tool, brought in this concept of card aging, and it was based on our own experience, which is that the cycle time of a card, we often measure the cycle time of the entire card, of the entire value stream. However, it's only in a few areas where it typically gets bottlenecked. And it's important to be able to make sure that in those typical stages of the value stream, there's high level of focus to say, okay, it should not get here bottlenecked, and we are able to get it done in time. So in Swift Kanban, you can define these threshold limits for a simple RYG indicator and say, hey, a critical defect should be done in 2 days, should be done in most cases by 2 days, or 24 hours, bad scenario, 2 days, absolutely unacceptable as 5 days, right? So you know that as soon as it crosses the 2 days, it goes into your red zone and you need to do something about it. So seeing that card aging during your stand-up call helps the people to understand that why is this card aging and what can be done to make sure that we take it out and move it fast from left to right, unless there is a blocker, unless there's an explicit blocker on the card. Now, based on the cycle time of the card, the question that I often get asked is, so what are these limits? How do you define these threshold values? And to begin with, you can only use your judgment. But once you have actually started running your Kanban system in 3 to 6 months' time, you can definitely see a typical cycle time distribution at the overall card level, even at individual value stream stage level. So if you can see that, then it becomes very easy to say that, okay, I would want most of my cards to get done within the time that within the modal value, and then an amber threshold, which will be either an 80% or a 90% cutoff, whatever the team wants to be comfortable with. So that you want to try and make sure that there are very few outliers that are skewing your cycle time distribution curve to the right and making your predictability of the cycle time forecast more and more inaccurate. What I mean by that is that the more condensed the distribution, the more predictable the outcome, because the spread is narrow. The more spread the distribution, the lesser the predictability, the greater the variability, because the spread is much longer. So it's important for teams to be able to recognize that as we go ahead and keep on improving, the cycle time curve should slowly become more and more condensed, though you will see that pattern will still be visible. It will still never become a bell curve. The other important thing here also is that you need to keep in mind to do this, so that what happens is every time you deprioritize one card to pick up another card which has now come with a higher level of priority, you're essentially building on what we call as flow debt, which means that if your card cycle time was supposed to be done in 5 days, but you started with it, on the second day you got interrupted because something else came in, now you got to block this card and pick up that card because it's got a higher level of priority. That's a business reality. So when that happens, then the cycle time of the original card is going to get delayed. It's going to get extended. And that will again create a more spread in your cycle time distribution. So it's very helpful to be able to make sure that slowly and slowly be able to be able to consciously shift it to the left, make it more condensed, and try and pick up cards in the order that you know that they're supposed to be picked up, or somebody has done a rank ordering, so that you avoid that situation of having to block cards because of something else of higher priority has come in. Exceptions will always be there. That's the reality of life. But at least that's the intent that we as teams should have and be cognizant of. So, like I said, um, diligently analyze what are the issues in your downstream team. That's where your 70-80% of your workforce is working. You want to make sure that they're highly productive. If the only way to make sure that your throughput is high and is very optimal is making sure that your 70-80% of the workforce is working at without any interruptions. They are really flowing, as one would call in our language. So therefore, you want to make sure that there are very little blockers. And if there are blockers, then you are able to understand why that happened and what can I do about it. In our scenario, as you can see, it is a very high reason for our blockers, which is task switching because of expedited items. And it's a it's important for our teams to be able to make sure that we do leave a certain amount of capacity working within where we can pick up expedite cards. Now that doesn't mean that the team would be idle, but the way to solve that problem is to be able to is to be able to work on intangible cards where you can have a much more relaxed cycle time distribution. So in that case, even if this card gets blocked, even if the intangible card gets blocked, it does not make a difference to your core business card, which was otherwise would have been delayed, and your predictability would have gone worse because the distribution curve would have stretched. Many teams do retrospectives, but I think all the templates that we have in the most cases miss a core issue about doing retrospectives. Most retrospectives that I've seen ask the people to come out with what are the issues, etc., what they feel, and they come out with issues which are typically not in their circle of influence. They're in the global circle of influence. And therefore, what happens in that scenario is that whether you say that, hey, we have a lot of new folks joining the team. Well, at that point of time, they have joined the team. There's nothing you can do about it right now. You can give them some training. So what you need to do is to reinforce during a retro that we need to think about what we can do in our own circle of influence. That said, do your blocker analysis, look at the drop card analysis. As I said, when you do change priorities, you do add to flow debt. So make sure that you are able to identify the number of times when you had to change your priorities, and a little bit of promoting our own retrospective tool. Use a tool like a nimble retro tool, which not only will help you do the retrospective, but more importantly, take you through a structured root cause analysis like a 5 why approach, and then help you put an action item tracker that you can track those action items to closure. There's very little value in doing retrospectives every 2 weeks if those action items are not getting closed. People just lose confidence. They begin to think it's a complete waste of time. So use a tool which has a good approach to do root cause analysis, which will allow you to spend time on your root cause analysis. Often, again, I see that most people spend 80 out of the 1 hour, they'll spend 50 minutes in just talking, and very little time is left for the actual action item to emerge. And once the action items are defined, the team should do a call within the week to make sure that somebody is working on the action item. It should not be that you are just moving from one retrospective to the next retrospective, and the only time you revisit the retrospective, only time you revisit the action items are in the following retrospective. So continuous improvement, retrospectives, but again, huge scope of improvement. So all this was about the process. What has happened in the years that we have talked about productivity and process improvement is that in the early part of the last century, we made tremendous gains in these two areas, right? First with things like time and motion study, then with lean process, Deming's thinking. So all these things helped us gain tremendous efficiency. And then since the 70s and 80s, technology took us to the next level of efficiency improvement. But in the middle of all this, the individual who's working on it, for them, they have only been seeing an increasing work pressure, right? They have to do things faster, quicker, and the cycle seems to have no end to it. So the question is, how can we provide a sense of focus and prioritization back on the workforce? And so what Nimble Work has done has gone back to understanding, going back to the basics of Maslow's hierarchy and seeing how can we help people become part of a social belonging team, help build their esteem, and get a sense of fulfillment. And we have built use cases to be able to actually deliver to these outcomes. So if you think about it, in today's hybrid work environment where people are distributed remotely, we often just talk to each other only when we need to have a meeting. In the meeting, we have a specific agenda, we do the agenda, and then we end the call, right? As a result, we just know the individual as somebody who's going to do another work item. We don't really know that individual. We don't really understand what's happening in their life, what's happening in their background. All those nice things that we used to have when we would step out together for a lunch or for a coffee, or for any such social occasion, right? So within the Swift Kanban tool, very soon in Q1, you will see us roll out an entire platform for you to be able to thank, talk, and celebrate on the product itself. You'll be able to welcome your two new team members, appreciate their milestones, recognize their achievements, be able to understand what should you prioritize between all the stuff that you have on your plate, create alignment and transparency, because now you can see everything on a board. So you not only see your work, but you see everybody else's work. Create a better sense of ownership, because you're pulling work that you're interested to do, not just somebody dumping work on your plate. So a lot of the Kanban principles, in conjunction with a spirit of thank, talk, and celebrate, can help build a sense of greater empathy, a sense of belonging, and a greater sense of commitment and alignment with the work that an individual is doing. So we hope that this would make a significant impact beyond just process improvement and efficiency productivity. So here are some examples. If somebody has done a good job, you can just send a kudo to them, and there are lots of templates that you can pull from to be able to do that. And clearly, positive reinforcement across the board helps you to be able to create a sense of wanting to come back, wanting to see, okay, who's appreciated my work. And we have a gamification platform that we've implemented so that people who do positive reinforcement or who are part of the positive reinforcement process actually get appreciated and recognized. If you're part of a new team, you will get a nice welcome message. If you do a certification, you will go ahead and get a nice again, appreciation. And this is broadcast to all the team, all your team members, so that they can appreciate what you have been able to accomplish. If you are able, if you are celebrating an event in your organization, you can post those pictures. People, once again, remember, all your people are not in the same location. Many of them are distributed. So it makes everybody understand and feel what's happening in the organization, what's happening in the company, what's happening in the team, even if I'm not able to be there physically for whatever reason at any given point of time. And then there are things that can help you, help you pull yourself up if you're feeling down a little bit on any given day, right? So there are a whole bunch of motivational quotes that will keep coming at you occasionally, that you can switch off or close. But the intent is to provide an occasional support in an otherwise difficult environment, so that you get reinforced to be able to do a better job. So we have built some cases from the tool, but clearly humanized work, a tool is only one small part. A lot will depend upon how the management and the leadership team looks at it. Our hope is that for people understand that it's a line responsibility and not an HR function. If you're doing software development, that's pretty much my last piece. If you're doing software development, these three things will help you build flow in your team. If you're able to build small independent functional work units, whatever you call them, which are independent and testable, work will flow. If you continue to do your Microsoft project kind of tasks and put them on your board, things will not flow. It will all get stuck in system testing. So it's important to truly have functional, independent work units that are small, that are testable, so that work can flow. If you need to automate everything, because you cannot keep manually testing every time what has already been rolled out. So you need to automate everything. And my personal experiences, despite all the good talk about TDD and BDD, if you have people who have been in the industry for 10 years, 15 years, it's a very difficult shift to make them go through. It's better off to start such an initiative with your freshers, make them habituate to get habituated to the process, and then disperse them in your product teams, in your actual development teams, so that they start seeding that learning across their seniors within that team. And last but not the least, estimation has not done any good to anybody. It has not helped. At Nimble work, we have not estimated for at least, I think, 7-8 years now, perhaps, including for our customization estimates. We only give our customers a t-shirt size, and we say this t-shirt size is in this ballpark of an estimate. That's all it is. That's all we can tell you. And we have been able to convince them that that's far more accurate and far more rational way than to give an estimate and then keep on arguing whether something should be 10% days or something should be 11.5% days. It is just not useful use of anybody's time. So in closing, there are lots of simple things that one can do to increase and deliver value from your Kanban system. We don't need to adopt all the things that we teach. Everything can be done in a slow and an incremental manner, which is exactly what the Kanban teaching is all about. So it's very tempting to pick up all the things that we understand, but very highly avoidable. I've shared some of the tips. I believe it would generally help anybody who is using a Kanban method to improve their process. But if it but the degree of impact that you will see in any given team will obviously change from one team to another. One common mistake that I see, or one common issue that I see, is especially in IT service organizations where project teams get formed from one team to another as as one project gets completed and a new one forms, is that they assume that I can start with the maturity of the previous project and take my new project from that point. It doesn't work that way. The new project has new team members. You need to build their Kanban system with them in conversation and part of the discussion process, and then let them evolve at whatever pace that they are comfortable with. If you have been doing this for a period of time, hopefully some of them have done Kanban projects before, and therefore you will be able to therefore you'll be able to implement that better. And humanized work will finally get the focus back on the individual. So think about how to get focus a little bit on the individual, and not just think about the process and the process improvement part. I'll end my session here, and I'm open for any Q&A at this time.
All right. Thanks, Suri. As usual, a very interesting session, especially for those of you who are familiar with the Kanban method and have been implementing Kanban systems. I'm sure you got a ton of very valuable practical advice on how to make your Kanban system more useful, and of course to be able to really make it scalable for the overall team and organization. So I'll encourage you to put in your questions using the Q&A panel. In the meantime, sorry, let me start with a common problem that I see Kanban teams struggle with, and it has to do with both the workflow design as well as with the WIP limit implementation that he talked about. So people struggle with whether each individual value stream stage should be ready in progress, or should they be in progress and done, and whether the team that's finishing the person who's working on a particular stage, when they finish their work, should they move it to the next columns or the next stage is ready stage, or the done stage of their own work stage, right? I don't know if you've seen that discussion come up, but it has a relationship with the WIP limit definition. So if you define the WIP limit, as you said, at the top of your own work stage, even though you're done with an item, it remains as part of your own WIP. Whereas the moment you move it to the ready column of the next person's stage or the next stage, it becomes part of their WIP. So, and there are different cultural and practical issues with why people prefer one or the other. But I wanted to check whether you've seen that, and what has been your advice.
So, as I said, the stages, let's say a simple development process, the stage is analysis, design, development, testing, right? These are the stages at a high level. Now, whenever you see that, I'm going to, let's say in our own nimble work case, where the design is being done by one team, and then it is handed over to the development team. So the way you want to do it is that you break the design into an in progress done, and you put so that the design team is done. They will move the card into their done column. And the intent is very simple. The intent is that if the development is not able to pick up from the done column of the design stage at the same rate at which design team is finishing their work, then clearly there is a cadence mismatch. The downstream is slower than the upstream. And in which case, then you do want the design team to get the signal, which is the original intent of the Kanban term. You want them to get the signal that, hey, I don't need to do any more design. I've already reached the WIP limit of my design stage. I've done enough of my design. I can do something else. I can perhaps go to another team, or if I have certain skills that I can help the development team, I can sit with them and help them out there. But either way, there is no point in doing more design if the downstream team is not able to pull it up. If you go ahead and put, instead of the done in the design column, if you put a ready in the as the first column of the development stage, then what's going to happen is the design team is going to continue doing the stuff, because as far as they're concerned, they are done. So they will keep on adding to their stuff, though the downstream team is not able to pick it up. So the signal that they are supposed to get, which is, hey, don't do more stuff because your work is already getting bottlenecked. Instead, think of how to collaborate with your downstream team to resolve that constraint. That principle will not get implemented if you do it by putting the ready column in the development side. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I've seen people get very emotional about their WIP limit and the ability for them to comply with the WIP limits and so forth. So
yeah, so it's
always
because I
very
think
interesting.
people are not recognizing the fact that the WIP limit is supposed to help the silos, help us move away from the silos into a more collaborative way of talking with each other, understanding each other constraints, and like the classic theory of constraints, summit the resources to elevate the constraint. That is the principle that helps when you put that WIP limit. So if you just put the WIP limit at the wrong place, you're not getting the result as to why you need the WIP limit in the first place.
Good point. Okay, let's take some audience questions. There is a question about, you talked about the allocating 20 to 30, if I understood you also correctly, 20 to 30% of the capacity for upstream. Now, how do you actually visualize that on the Kanban system when you have potentially different boards for upstream versus downstream, etc.? How do you communicate to, as a policy, to everyone in the system, that 20 to 30% of capacity is allocated to upstream? Yeah, have you any practical examples?
Yeah, sure. So I think firstly, the important thing is to recognize that upstream is not just a product management function. The typical perception that we have in the industry is upstream is product management, downstream is development. That is a classic source of many subsequent problems downstream. So if you upstream, yes, is significantly run by the product team and the design team. They are conceptualizing what needs to be done, how it's going to be done, discussing with the stakeholders. But you do need a sense of validation from some of the senior people in your development side. And I'm continuing to take a software development experience because it's an easier example to relate to. You do need their feedback to make sure, hey, this is even implementable, right? If I go ahead and design something that my architecture just cannot support today, there is no point in building that requirement. Or that requirement will need to be reimagined so that my current technology stack can make it possible. Or I will need to get some time so that I can go ahead and do some technical stories and build that capability before I start working that functional card. What the SAFE guys used to call it as architectural runway, which is that there's a bunch of folks who are looking ahead what needs to be done and making sure that the technical infrastructure and the capability is built in the product before the functional work comes in. So it is important for some of the seniors from with the core development experience to collaborate with the functional guys and understand what is being asked to be built, how it should work, especially the non-performing, the non-functional requirements like performance, and make sure that the correct expectations are set. And of course, often in such conversations, I've heard even functional issues come up. Hey, what will happen in this edge case scenario? How do we handle that? So all those things will then come up in that discussion between the so-called business and the development person, right? And that was a classic mechanism of how agile was supposed to work, right? Business and development together, sitting together and collaborating with each other as to what needs to be built. So taking some people from the downstream side and making them work on the upstream side helps you to actually break that silo. About how to make it work, you can have it on 2 Kanban boards, absolutely, and you can make people work on both the being a part of both the Kanban boards. Tools like Swift Kanban will give you a consolidated whip of what the person has from both the teams, so that is not a problem at all. Or you can even put them on one board and have an upstream swim lane and a downstream swim lane both on the same board. So you can do it in different ways. I have found it, unless you have a, a key criteria of security, where you do not want downstream guys to see all the upstream cards and vice versa, which I think in all practical purposes is not the case. It is far more easier to put the upstream and than the downstream on one simple board, because you can then both the teams can see what is happening.
Cool, cool. Okay, we are at the bottom of the hour here, but let's take one more question. In the retro slide, you mentioned focus on your circle of influence. What did you mean by that?
So what I said, what I'm trying to highlight is that for every team that is doing the retrospective, one should reinforce the fact that when we are thinking about what are the issues and which ones to then prioritize and take up for root cause analysis, let's pick up those where the team can do something, right? There's no point in saying that, oh my, there's no point in saying that, we need more salaries. Yeah, everybody needs more salaries, but that's at the team level, you're not going to be able to do much. Or this is a high attrition market. Fair enough, that's an industry pattern. At the team level, there's not much that one can do. So focus on things that the team can do as a self-correction mechanism, as an individual or together collaboratively, that can resolve that issue that you are doing the root cause analysis for. Okay. Very few retrospectives often come up where the actionable is on the team itself. A majority of what I've seen are actionables on everybody other than the team. And rarely it helps, because those are constraints. In most cases, those are constraints. Those are not going to be things that you are going to be able to radically change and shift.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, I think we need to close it at this stage. If you can stop sharing, let me share the closing slide on my deck. Can you stop sharing your slide?
Did I not stop? There.
Go. All right, folks. So just sharing the last slide where you can get all the information about our company and contact information for both Sudhi and myself, as well as to check out some of the things that Sudhi talked about in the context of implementing Kanban method and using of Swift Kanban, if you're interested in that. Other than that, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. It is the last webinar for the year for us, and in the new year we'll come up with more topics, more interesting formats, and we look forward to being in touch with you to have you participate in these sessions in the next year. In the meantime, I'm sure all of you are getting ready for the holidays, if not already there. So wish you all a very happy holidays and a very happy and successful new year. And Sudhi, thanks a lot. As usual, very interesting session. A lot of very insightful tips and tricks for really making a successful Kanban implementation.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.